Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be diving into something I'm sure you guys deal with every day.
Absolutely.
Corrosion inhibitors
Yep.
in oil and gas gathering pipelines.
All right.
And we've got a stack of research here
Oh, yeah.
that suggests that maybe our old set it and forget it approach
Class.
with continuous inhibitors
Yeah.
needs a serious upgrade.
For sure.
I mean, you work in the field,
I do.
firsthand how complex these pipeline systems are.
Absolutely. And that's where things get interesting, Assuming every pipeline has the same corrosion risk is like using the same wrench for every bolt.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So what are we missing when we oversimplify things like that?
Well, we often see pipeline failures even when those continuous inhibitor pumps are chugging away upstream.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
I thought those things were supposed to be like our first line of defense.
They are, but,
Okay.
picture this. You've got variations in flow rates, pipeline angles, how the gas and liquid are interacting,
Right.
even debris hanging out in there. It's like a constantly changing obstacle course for those inhibitor molecules.
So it's not enough to just have the inhibitors present.
Right.
They need to be able to reach all those nooks and crannies.
You got it. You got it. And here's a stat that might make you rethink your next coffee break.
Oh, boy.
85%
Okay.
of internal corrosion failures in gathering systems are due to accelerated corrosion.
Okay.
Not just the slow and steady kind, but sudden aggressive bursts.
So like bursts of corrosion.
Exactly. And standard risk assessments often miss this
Oh, really?
because they focus on those normal flow conditions.
Right. So they're not thinking about those like anomalies and stuff?
Exactly.
Okay, that's a wake-up call, 85%.
It is.
So what triggers this accelerated corrosion then?
Well,
It's those unpredictable events that we were just talking about.
you're spot on. Think about starting up, you get a surge of liquid that can kick up debris, and bam, you've got the perfect conditions for corrosion to go wild.
So it's like a flash flood of corrosion hitting those pipelines?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
And if your continuous inhibitors are only designed for that steady state flow,
Right.
they're not going to be as effective in those chaotic moments.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Right, so how do continuous inhibitors even work in the first place?
Okay.
Do they just kind of float around and neutralize the corrosive elements?
Not quite imagine them as tiny bodyguards clinging to the pipe's surface, forming a protective film.
All right.
But here's the catch.
Oh.
They need water movement to constantly replenish that film.
Interesting. So it's not a one-and-done kind of deal.
Nope. Continuous inhibitors depend on a constant flow of water to keep that protective layer fresh.
Okay.
It's like a game of leapfrog. One inhibitor molecule hops off, and another one carried by the water takes its place.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what happens if the water isn't flowing? Like in a low-lying section of pipe where things get stagnant?
That's where the leapfrog game breaks down.
Yeah.
And inhibitors can't reach those areas effectively.
Wow.
And even if there's an inhibitor in the stagnant water,
Right.
it might not be enough to prevent corrosion. Corrosion can actually be happening right underneath that stagnant water, even with inhibitors present.
So even with continuous inhibitors, some parts of our pipelines might be left vulnerable.
Yeah,
That's a sobering thought.
it is, but it's also a chance to get ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Instead of assuming continuous inhibitors are a cure-all, we need to start thinking about a more tailored approach.
Okay, so we need to move beyond the one-size-fits-all mentality.
Exactly.
But what does a truly tailored approach to corrosion mitigation actually look like?
It starts by acknowledging that each pipeline segment has its own unique risk profile, influenced by factors like flow dynamics, the presence of debris, and the likelihood of those sudden transient events.
So we can't just look at the pipeline as a whole. We need to break it down into smaller chunks and assess the risks for each section.
You got it. Yeah.
And that means moving beyond those standard time-based pigging schedules.
Yeah.
And thinking about more responsive strategies.
For sure.
Strategies that are triggered by specific events.
Exactly.
Like starting up instead of just the calendar.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm starting to see where you're going with this. It's not just about the type of inhibitor we use,
Right.
but also how and when we use it.
Precisely. And it might also mean exploring other mitigation techniques,
Okay.
especially in those areas where continuous inhibitors might be less effective.
Interesting.
Yeah. It all boils down to, understanding that continuous inhibitors, while valuable, need a little help. Sometimes we can't just assume they're a magic bullet solution for every scenario.
Right. Especially when those unpredictable events throw a wrench in the works.
Exactly.
But you mentioned responsive strategies earlier. What would those look like in practice?
Well, think about all the data we have at our fingertips these days. We're talking wellhead pressure readings, flow rates, even the history of each well shut-in periods.
Wow.
We can use that data to predict which wells are likely to cause those troublesome liquid surges during startup.
So we can actually anticipate those high-risk events instead of just reacting after the damage is done.
Exactly. It's all about shifting from a reactive mindset to a proactive one.
Okay.
By analyzing the data, we can pinpoint those areas that need a little extra attention when it comes to corrosion mitigation.
Okay, so data analysis is key,
Mhm.
but how does that translate into action?
It means we can be more strategic with things like pigging runs.
Right.
Instead of sticking to a rigid schedule, we can trigger those runs based on specific events or data trends.
Got it.
For example, if the data suggests a high risk of debris mobilization after a well startup, we might want to send a pig through that pipeline segment right away.
So it's like a targeted strike against corrosion instead of just hoping we catch it in time.
Precisely. And with the advancements in smart pigging technology, we can gather even more detailed information about the condition of our pipelines.
Oh, wow.
Some pigs can actually detect corrosion in its early stages, pinpoint areas of wall thinning, and even identify potential leak points.
Wow, that's impressive. It's like having a tiny detective crawling through the pipeline, reporting back on the corrosion situation.
I like that analogy, and by combining that intel with our other data sources, we can really fine-tune our corrosion mitigation efforts.
So we're talking about a multi-pronged approach, right? Not just relying on continuous inhibitors, but using data analysis, targeted pigging runs, and potentially other mitigation techniques as well.
Exactly. It's about creating a truly risk-aligned corrosion mitigation program, one that's tailored to the specific needs of each pipeline segment.
This all makes a lot of sense, but I have to ask, if this approach is so effective, why isn't everyone already doing it?
That's a great question. Part of it is the mindset shift.
Ah.
Moving from a reactive to a proactive approach requires embracing new technologies and being willing to challenge those old assumptions.
I imagine some people might be hesitant to rock the boat,
Yeah.
especially if the current system seems to be working at least most of the time.
That's understandable, but the reality is that the cost of prevention is almost always lower than the cost of failure.
Right.
And we're not just talking about financial costs here. A pipeline leak or rupture can have serious environmental and safety implications as well.
Right, not to mention the potential damage to a company's reputation. Nobody wants to be in the headlines for the wrong reasons.
Absolutely. So it's not just about protecting our pipelines, it's about protecting our businesses and our communities as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the real power of this data-driven approach lies. It allows us to make more informed decisions, minimize risks, and ultimately create a safer and more sustainable future for our pipelines.
Okay, I'm convinced this data-driven, risk-aligned approach is the way to go. But let's be honest, it sounds like a pretty big undertaking.
Right.
Where do we even start?
Well, I get it. It can feel overwhelming at first, but the good news is
Yeah.
you don't have to overhaul your entire program overnight.
Okay.
Start by taking a close look at your existing data. Are you collecting the right information to make informed decisions about inhibitor placement and picking schedules?
So things like wellhead pressure flow rates,
Yeah.
historical well data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might be surprised by how much valuable information you already have at your fingertips.
Right.
And if there are gaps in your data, now's the time to start filling them.
Right, because you can't analyze what you don't have.
Precisely. Once you've got a solid data foundation, you can start digging deeper.
Okay.
Look for trends and patterns that might indicate areas of higher corrosion risk.
Gotcha.
For example, are there certain wells that consistently cause pressure surges during startup?
Oh, okay.
Are there sections of pipeline that experience frequent flow fluctuations?
And this is where those data analytics skills come in handy, right?
Absolutely, and don't be afraid to leverage technology. There are some fantastic software tools available that can help you visualize the data, identify those high-risk areas, and even model different mitigation scenarios.
So we're not just staring at spreadsheets all day trying to make sense of the numbers.
Not at all. These tools can generate maps, charts, and graphs that make it much easier to see the big picture and make informed decisions.
Okay, so we've analyzed the data and identified the high-risk zones. Now what?
Now it's time to tailor your mitigation strategy accordingly.
Yeah.
For those pipeline segments with steady flow and minimal risk of transient events, continuous inhibitors might be all you need.
Okay.
But for those high-risk areas, you'll want to consider additional layers of protection.
So things like more frequent pigging runs or even adjusting the type of inhibitor we're using in those areas?
Exactly. You might also consider batch treatments where you inject a higher concentration of inhibitor into a specific pipeline segment to address a particular concern.
And don't forget those smart pigs they can provide such valuable insights into the condition of the pipeline.
Absolutely. If the data suggests a potential issue, sending a smart pig through that section can give you a much clearer picture of what's happening and help you fine-tune your mitigation efforts.
It's really about using all the tools in our arsenal, both the data and the technology, to create a truly comprehensive and effective corrosion mitigation program.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about moving beyond that set it and forget it mentality and taking a more proactive, data-driven approach.
And in the end, it's all about protecting those pipelines, minimizing risks, and ensuring a safe and reliable energy future.
Well said. Continuous inhibitors are a valuable tool, but they're only part of the solution. By embracing a risk-aligned approach and leveraging the power of data, we can take corrosion mitigation to a whole new level.
This has been a truly insightful deep dive. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure. I hope this has given you some food for thought and maybe even inspired you to reevaluate your own approach to corrosion mitigation.
To our listeners out there, we encourage you to take a fresh look at your data, assess your risks, and explore the full range of tools and technologies available. Remember, effective corrosion mitigation is an ongoing process of evaluation, adaptation, and continuous improvement.
And as always, stay curious, stay informed, and stay ahead of those corrosion challenges.